Exchange. We try to do these quarterly, and we are now being recorded, which is good. But don't let the recording stop you from conversation. The nonprofit exchange really is an opportunity for you to have conversation among yourselves. It's what we really want this to be. We had often heard that the topic of internal controls is something that has been of concern to a lot of nonprofit organizations. Matthew can probably talk about that a little bit more as an auditor and what he sees working with nonprofit organizations. I'm going to really take myself out of this conversation. I'm here to listen. I'm here to see what everyone has to say. But our topic today, the importance of internal controls. We'll start with that. If we get through that, we want to throw a couple other things on the floor to have conversation with as well. We will do that. But I would like to introduce Matthew Adams with Wipfli accounting firm. He is an auditor. I know he's worked with our organization several years. Matthew, go ahead and introduce yourself and maybe talk a little bit about internal controls, maybe the definition of it, the importance of it, and some of the things that you have seen as an auditor working with nonprofit organizations, some things that might be red flags.
Sure, that sounds good. I did kind of a quick run through this morning to make sure I had it. I was told I have about 10 minutes, so should be somewhere around there. But as she said, my name is Matthew Adams. I'm a senior accountant and a CPA at Wipfli in Wausau. I grew up in Rib Lake, Wisconsin, which is a small town about an hour northwest of Wausau, and went to UW-Eau Claire, got my bachelor's in accounting and finance, and then moved back to Wausau and started at Wipfli in January of 2016, and I've been here since then. I started out in our manufacturing and distribution group, working on audits with them, and I kind of just dabbled in different types of audits, including nonprofits. And I found that the more nonprofit audits that I worked on, the more that I enjoyed working on them. So starting in 2019, around the springtime, I transitioned full-time to working on nonprofit audits. So I work on a lot of different nonprofit audits, mostly in Wisconsin, some in other regions too. And other personal thing about me is I'm married to my wife Amanda, who's also a CPA, and we have a 6-month-old son, as I was kind of talking about before, who's named Eli, and he's just an amazing little boy. So, but in regards to internal controls, the items that I kind of wanted to talk about today is internal controls and why they're important and how they should fit the needs of the organization. And then a big thing that I see with internal controls with nonprofits is just trying to keep adequate internal controls while there's like limited staffing. And then one other item I thought of that's been relevant for different audits I've worked on is the need for data and other security, and just some things to consider with dealing with internal controls. So I did look up the definition of internal controls, and I saw there were a lot of different definitions that encompass different things. And one that I liked was, it says, an internal control is a process for assuring an organization's objectives in operational effectiveness and efficiency, reliable financial reporting, and compliance with laws, regulations, and policies. And why I kind of like this one is that I think a lot of times we think of internal controls more in relation to like fraud, but it is important with financial reporting and making sure things are recorded correctly and that processes are operating effectively. So for some red flags that I've seen for internal controls for audits that I've worked on, one of the bigger ones that I usually notice is one person is involved in all the aspects of a single transaction. So for instance, the same person who opens the mail and gets the check, posts the check to the general ledger, and ends up depositing it into the bank. So if possible, those steps, it would be good if they could be separated in some way amongst different people. Another red flag that I've seen a lot of times is just with like the custody of assets. And For example, a lot of times I'll see a safe at a client, but in practice it isn't really locked, or everybody knows where the key is. Oh, I got a little bit of feedback. Oh, we should be okay. Or like everybody knows where the key is and they would all have access to the safe. Or like two, there could be a cabinet that has confidential records, but in practice too, that cabinet isn't locked or everybody knows where the key is and how they could get into it. So while the risk might be low in theory, it would still be best to make sure that the access is limited to people who should have the access. And another thing that I've seen over the last year is there's been just so many more phishing emails and information like technology related threats. So for instance, I work on a client and they actually ended up, it wasn't the client, but somebody had hacked into their system and they sent me a malicious email with like an attachment that they wanted me to open. Or another example is a client that I'm working with right now. They just had a really big ransomware attack and they literally lost like all of their files that they had. So we're working through that right now, just trying to get the information that we need for the audit. So something to consider would be what backups you have in place. Like if something like this would happen, like if you have a backup, like a hard backup that could be kept offsite, or if there might be like a cloud-based storage system that you would still have access to the information if something like this would happen. And like in order to make sure that the damage would be as minimal as possible. So those are some red flags. And the area that I normally focus on with internal controls with nonprofits is just related to separation of duties, mainly because just there's such small staffing a lot of times at the nonprofits that I work on. So trying to make sure that one person isn't involved in all of the aspects of a transaction. And there are a few examples I think that are good for different clients that I've worked with over the past couple of years. So I just wanted to share a couple of those with you. So for one of them, the client a few years ago, they had around 20 people that were staffed there. So a pretty good sized organization. And they had that many people because they received a lot of grant funding and did outreach and different projects in the community. And what ended up happening is they lost a good amount of that grant funding. So they had to downsize the organization in order to make sure that it could continue to run effectively. So now they're actually down to about 4 or 5 staff members. So working with them through the audits these past few years, a big thing with us has been how to maintain proper internal controls with such a reduced staffing. Because when they had so many people, it was easy to separate the steps amongst different people for 20 compared to just 4 or 5. And what I've seen with them that's worked really well is just having really open communication and making sure that multiple people are involved with steps where possible. And just making sure that multiple people are aware of what's going on with different things that are happening. For instance, with funding coming in or funding going out, they make sure that everybody is really aware of what's going on in the process. So if something looks off, one of them for sure would notice it and be able to see that something is off. And then one other client that I've worked with this year, and something I think for you to consider, is how to get members of your board of directors or even I guess other people involved where it would make sense. Because I work with an organization and they have a large amount of investments. And typically every year we've had a really large adjustment related to the investments just because they're kind of difficult to track and they've just been off a little bit every year. So we've always had an adjusting entry that we propose to them. Well, in the last year or so, they have a treasurer who stepped in, who's been really good for them. And I had heard a lot of how he's been so good with helping them with different things. And starting out with the audit this year, and I've looked through, and yeah, the investments are reconciled perfectly because he's done so much with them, with getting it into QuickBooks and making sure things are recorded properly and things like that. So I think something to consider would be what expertise members of the board of directors have and how that can be utilized in the organization in relation to controls, because for that, in relation to financial reporting, their financial reporting has improved a lot just based on this one change that they made and having their treasurer step in and do more with it. And also one other organization, they also had a reduction in staffing. They were even smaller. They went from 3 people down to 1 at the start of the audit that we had worked on last year. And so we were wondering, well, mostly I was wondering how would there be any separation of duties then if there's just one person in the organization? But what they ended up doing is also getting the board of directors more involved with like reviewing different aspects of transactions and making sure things are recorded correctly until they were able to transition and find somebody else to take over that role. So I think a big thing that I've seen over the past year or so is just trying to get the board of directors involved and thinking of who could add additional expertise in relation to things like this.
Matthew, I have a question. Do you have a rule of thumb? Do you have a rule of thumb on how many people should be involved in a transaction at a minimum?
Ideally, I would say at least 2, if possible. But sometimes it's, as I've seen in the past year, so sometimes even that, I guess, isn't really possible. But ideally, it would be at least 2, I would say. Yep, and 2, what I've seen is just controls should just be designed to, because there are limited resources. So really, I guess it's a matter of balancing the risks that you have with also having the proper level of operational effectiveness. That's how I would kind of see it, I guess. So yeah, those are my main points that I had. I kept it to about 10 minutes, so did pretty good there. But I don't know if anybody else has questions or comments or anything, but it's been interesting too with working remotely, just how controls are and how controls have changed. I think a lot of working remotely, email has been a big help with that, at least from our standpoint with documenting. You can send things to the people and it's easy to see, oh, this person approved it and they actually like reviewed it. So things like that.
Yeah, Pam, maybe you can back up that conversation with some samples of what we do here at the Community Foundation regarding, some of those internal controls that we've been implementing, or some of them have been around forever.
So Matthew, this is going to be new to you too, because we've really focused on this at the foundation this year. And I started by putting all of our different steps or everything that we have to do in a transaction. I put it on paper, and then you can very easily see where you need to insert somebody if like there's 4 or 5 steps in a row done by one person. So we kind of started segregating there. But we started with incoming funds, which are usually checks coming in the mail. So we have 2 people going to get the mail and they're processing it together. So at that point, it's open together, it's endorsed with a bank stamp. And then one person does one report and another person does another report. And by the time it gets to the bank, those 2 reports have to balance. So that's incoming. Outgoing, we're working on, I think we put ACH blocks on. During COVID, we had a lot of different organizations asking us to pay by ACH, so they didn't have to get the mail, and it was much easier for check signers. So what we do, first of all, every invoice that comes in, either ACH or physical invoices, have to be signed by Tim, and they're signed and dated. Then, of course, we have somebody else entering them and that whole process. And then the checks are created, which we have 2 signers, usually our CEO and a board member. And then also with those ACH blocks, we have a lot of different financial institutions. So we got it set up so that there's only one exit. So bank accounts have to be transferred, from account to account, but there's only one place that you can withdraw money, and that is with a check from one checking account. So if you need money in there, you have to transfer it. You can't just do a check and deposit it. So that's the outgoing part of it. And of course, wires, everything like that requires 2 people. Then this is a new part, and I'll give credit where credit is due. I got the idea from the United Way. And what we are implementing is an internal audit committee, which is going to be a board member that comes every month, and they're going to get the bank statement, and they're going to pick a bunch of transactions, and they're just going to verify that we are doing and following our processes. That should be in place. Here, we're going to start it and test it this month, and we'll see how it goes, and then probably tweak it. Other than that, I think those are about the only new processes that we've put in place. The segregation of duty, we always struggle with that, and we do the best we can, but that's a challenge for any organization, and I'm going to assume most of all of you are about our size as well. So just insert people, and maybe it's the same 2 people, but we alternate steps. You start here, and then the next person does something, and then you change. And so when you put it on paper, you can see where you actually have to separate, and it helps a lot. I think that's about it. If there's any questions on any of that.
Donna, I know you have some examples too with the Neighbor's Place as well. And sometimes working with volunteers adds another interesting element to your internal controls, people that come
absolutely.
in and out.
I was glad you asked me to speak about volunteers, because that's something I think we often don't take into consideration. The other examples that were shared, we follow most of those, and those are definitely best practices, but internally as far as controls. But with volunteers, you have folks who aren't here day to day, who are handling cash, whether it's an event, it's a donation, a one-off. So I wanted just to walk through some examples that I've seen here, because I'm going to call myself out here at the Neighbor's Place, because the examples I've seen here, I'm sorry, in case I don't know you, I've been here a year and a half. I'm the director of the Neighbor's Place. I have been in nonprofit for the past 10 years now. So some examples here, some examples over my travels. So this morning, I was telling Sue earlier, I was watching the news, and I saw a great example that made me think about the relevance of today's topic. They were talking on the morning news about the concert on Square. And I'm not picking on muscular dystrophy, if anyone here is from that organization, and they may be doing everything really right, but they are the recipients tonight of a cash donation. So maybe you guys have seen this if you've been at the concert, but they're going to pass around a boot, and you put cash in the boot, and it's benefiting United Muscular Dystrophy Association. So it made me think about that, because that's a great example. So who are the volunteers properly trained? Where does the cash in the boot go at the end of the event? Are there 2 people counting the cash and reconciling that cash? Because in my experience, most nonprofits, the volunteers are not always properly trained in that task of cash handling. That's something that is often just kind of overlooked, or we got the money and so-and-so's in charge of the money, but it really does need to be documented. Who is handling it? Who's cashing out at the end of the day? So that I saw that this morning, it made me think about that. There's another good example. Sometimes your nonprofit might be the recipient of a cash donation, maybe like tonight, there's an organization holding an event. And even that organization, even though they may not be a nonprofit, it might be a service club. Somebody reached out to me about, they had done an event and wanted us to pick up the cash or the check on a certain day. And then they called me and said, oh, we're not ready yet. It was a couple weeks out. So, of course, you're going to be gracious. Okay, no problem. Just let me know when. But in my mind, I'm thinking cash control. I'm thinking that shouldn't happen. That organization should have already had something in place. That money should have already been balanced and everything should be ready to go. It shouldn't be weeks and weeks and weeks out. So that's a red flag. But there's a lot of things that are happening recently in, especially with us using social media more frequently as nonprofits than we did in previous years. So for example, Facebook Marketplace, I discovered that somebody in my organization, a volunteer, love these people. They're very well-meaning people, great people to have on board with us. We're selling things on Marketplace and giving us the donation. And that's all fine and good, but you should be aware as the director or as the organization, if somebody is selling something on your behalf, just to, make sure you know what that is. And then when you get those donations, make sure you are logging those onto a daily log sheet or whatever it is you use. And I'm sure Matthew will agree with this, documentation, the more you have, the better. There's not really, the more you have, the better. So for example, this is I was looking for an example this morning, but this is Facebook Marketplace. It reminded me of a sale we did recently. And so I just printed, and you can just simply print it. It's dated, has all the details you need. You can write on the back, attach it to your log sheet or scan it or do it electronically. We did a sale recently because, as many of you know, we're moving to the Community Partners Campus in 2022. So we've been trying to get rid of a lot of stuff. We had a moving sale. We had a lot of stuff in our building. And I had all the volunteers. We had a training because that's really important. Make sure the volunteers are trained. We had specific people assigned to the task of cash handling. They were all given a dollar amount of cash. It was noted how much they received at the beginning of the day. During the day, when they had cash, we had to cash out. We went in my office. We shut the door. Two of us noted how much money it was. And then at the end of the day, I made a deposit. It's that simple, really. I mean, during the day, somebody came up to me and said, "Oh, I got this guy over here that wants to buy this lamp, right? Wanted cash." I'm like, "No, they got to go to the cash handler." So, people kept wanting to just grab money and make a transaction really quick. And no, go to the cash handler. Everybody was identified who those folks were. They were wearing vests. So that's an easy one, but that's something that often gets missed in nonprofit work. So that's important. There is so here's my story. I'm going to out us. When I started working here a year and a half ago, they were getting ready. It was the week of empty bowls. Remember back in the day when we did those big things in person? We're going to get back to it though. But anyway, I popped in and we were having a meeting and they were talking about the raffles and who was doing the raffles and so forth. And so I asked, I said, "What's the cash handling policy for this event?" And everyone just kind of, was like awkward silence, looked at me like I had three heads. And I'm like, okay, opportunity here. We got to talk about this. We need to know who's handling what at what station, who's cashing out. Do we have, and you were talking about this raffle, silent auction, all of that. Okay, that's great. Do we have a license? Do we have a license? Do we have an A? Do we have a B? Who's documenting all of that? Because that needs to be reported at year end. Nobody knew. We did have a license, so I'll tell you that, but there was the documentation was lax. So, it's just those things. It's just having those best practices and making sure your volunteers are trained, that they know, and because it is really critical. So those are my big takeaways, is just making sure that it's like the garage sale. Somebody was arguing with me, a volunteer, bless her heart, but I'm like, I will say this with you guys. It's not your grandma's garage sale. You're a nonprofit, you're having this event. It's not just, money just doesn't flip around like that. So you have to document. And it's not that hard once you get in the practice of doing it. And now, and I would say we have the good fortune here that sometimes people randomly walk up with cash. We've been, serving a lot of folks, and sometimes people want to give us what they have, and God bless them when they do. And sometimes people walk to the door with a donation instead of mailing it. So we have a volunteer answering the door. Somebody hands you a check or cash. In the early days of this pandemic, people would just put it in their pocket. And at the end of the day, oh, hey, Donna, somebody came to the door with some cash. So now we all know, we have envelopes that are dated. You write it down, you bring it to me right away or to whomever admin. We note it same day. Same thing with our bikes. We have people that purchase our bikes here. We have a program that we've been doing for many years called Wheels Again, where we provide bikes to folks in this community. But I found out we were also selling refurbished bikes that were of value, and that's wonderful. But we didn't have a process in place. So I'd get a wad of cash with a Post-it note, right? Somebody would write on it. May or may not reach me on that same day, right? So that's not good practice. So now we have practices in place and it's documented. And to Pam's point, it's really wonderful to have a process, have it documented. You can walk through it. So we're really big on SOPs here now, standard operating procedures. So, and you can quickly identify those areas where you need to insert people. So that would be my advice from a volunteer standpoint. Just really, it's critically important. It's easy to do, easy to overlook, but very easy to do. And once you get that culture in place, people really, and now I'm really happy people, know they got to write it down, document it, bring it to me right away. We lock it. So Matthew, I'm kind of anal about this. So I have a lock box and a locked filing cabinet. My office is locked at night. One person other than myself has the key. So
That's perfect.
I'm very strict about that.
No, that's good.
Yeah, so that's my advice for everybody.
And you're never allowed to travel together with the person that has the key.
That's right.
Anyone else have any other practices that they use within their organizations or questions for anyone that has spoken so far?
So can I add just
Sure.
one more thing? We haven't implemented this, but we're in the process of this IT training where RMM is going to evaluate our processes, and then they're going to come in and train us on emails on what should be opened and what you should turn over to them and what you should block. And then they're eventually, after we're trained, then they test us. And they're going to put that process in, and I think it's going to be ongoing. But I know, Matthew, you spoke about that being an issue, and we see a lot of these. I'll get an email where somebody's asking me to change their direct deposit accounts for their payroll. We're small enough, I can tell from the emails that it's not valid, but I can obviously see that it's a huge issue and it's getting worse. So yeah, I forgot to say that.
That's a great example, Pam, because we had the same thing recently, and we've had this off and on, especially in this year, getting spam email. The one I see frequently is about hey, can you do me a favor and buy me $70 worth of eBay gift cards? So we talk about it in our monthly team meeting, or weekly, and we just had it happen again. And I have a new hire, so we revisited that on Monday, and so everybody knows. If it is not from it, everyone knows here, and we have it documented as an SOP, but my staff knows I will never ask them to do something like that from an email that is not my .org, my neighbor's place. So this was a Gmail. They all know I will never ask you anything work related via my personal email. And if you see those, we have to let everybody else know, we report it, we block it and so forth. Because when I was in Madison, before I came here, one of somebody that was my coworker, she got an email like that from our CEO. It looked valid. And the weird thing about it was we were in the middle of this big fundraiser. So the request didn't seem unusual. It didn't occur to her that it didn't flag that was unusual. So she actually went out and bought gift cards. And yeah, so she's, smart lady, but it can happen. So, when I looked at that email, I knew right away, because it wasn't his .org, it was something else. But that's something to talk about and share with your staff, because it happens a lot and more frequently. That Matt said, it's happening more frequently now.
Those do happen a lot. Tim, you're sending those to me all the time.
The scary thing with it too is that I feel like the emails have gotten like way more legitimate looking in the past couple of years. Like I used to get emails and right away I'm like, oh nope, it's spam, like delete. But some of them now too, I have to look a couple times. I'm like, like this looks like it could be legitimate. And yeah, I usually, first thing I always do is look at who sent it. And usually if it's not from a withfully.com email or one of my clients, I figure it's probably something that's like phishing or spam most of the
Yeah,
time.
that's an excellent point, because the one we received last week that my new hire got, it sounded, it was very sophisticated. It sounded like something I would have said.
Mhm.
So she didn't think, and it was good for us to revisit it because as a new hire, but I showed her the same. I said, it's not from my work email. I will never email you. I would text or call you. But yeah, they are getting better at the language, because before it was really obvious. But
Yep. Yeah, I agree.
This is Nancy. I have a question. As a small organization, we have a bookkeeper that is a contracted service, as opposed to being one of our staff. Are there any special precautions or procedures that we should have with regard to that?
Matthew, you might be able to take that one on, or
Yeah,
and just and Nancy, just a note, you are with Monk Gardens, correct?
Right. Thank you. Yes.
yeah, for me, it seems usually I've had a lot of success with audits where there's a third party who's hired to do the bookkeeping. It seems like a lot of times they too, it would be kind of like us. Like if I was doing the bookkeeping for somebody, it wouldn't just be me doing it. So I would have somebody else reviewing my work. But I would say just reviewing, but too, I guess there have been mistakes that I've seen before in situations like that too. So I would say just making sure to do a review and make sure that things are looking correct. Because
Right.
you know
And
the
so
ins and
our
outs better than
treasurer,
they would.
our treasurer could certainly do that, correct? That would be appropriate.
Yep.
Okay.
I agree. I think that would be good. But yeah, I would say having the third party, yeah, that's a good way to have. I would consider that an additional like control. You're having somebody on the outside doing it too. So I think that's good.
We have an outside person that does our books too, and that was one of the questions I asked when I came here, and I was glad because it gives you that extra level of accountability, and it's offsite. So
and another set of eyes looking at it.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Olivia, some of these issues are probably things that you have seen through the conservatory as well.
Yeah, thanks. I'm sitting here kind of absorbing and thinking and doing a lot of reflection as well. And I think I'm having a couple of ideas. I'm also feeling reaffirmed that the changes that we've made in the past 2 or so years have been right. For example, we did recently contract out some accounting support. I do the bookkeeping, but I have an organization that works with me, and at the end of the month, we review the financials to have that extra set of eyes. Also, because I'm not a finance person, I feel good about what I do, but my gosh, there's so much there. So just have that extra set of eyes. And especially, Matthew, you were talking about those larger investments and tracking that. And that's up here for me. I mean, I'm good at the day-to-day, but when we start talking about the investments and how to track that in your books, that gets more complicated. In addition to we have an endowment with the Community Foundation. How do we track that? I mean, just down to those details. So that's been so great for us. And as you know, I think I brought that up. I want to say maybe 6 months ago, a little more than that. And I spoke with Kelly before when you were with the CVA about that. So I feel good that we've done that. One of the challenges I have right now is we are down a staff member who traditionally does the deposits. I do the bookkeeping, the expenses. Our deposit person is gone. So, and I am going to fill that. But for the meantime, I've been thinking about how to best maintain transparency and those double checks while I am doing both at this point. So I'm a little bit stuck. I think we could do more, but at this point, for example, for deposits, I do check the mail, but traditionally somebody else who receives the check, our registrar, collects 90% of the checks and the finances. And then they reconcile with our registration software. And I download the reports, and she also, double checks that everything on the deposit is correct. So I guess with that, it's just, like I said, a little bit of thinking, how can I continue to make this better? But at the same time, a little reaffirming as well as to think we're on the right track for the most part, I think. I will say also, we received several of those phishing scam emails. And I actually wondered when I got the same exact thing with the gift cards that happened to my staff, where it came from me from a Gmail. And I thought somebody must have just been going down like Wausau nonprofits or something, and just at the same time hitting all of us. So I thought that was really funny. And I thought, like, gosh, I wonder if it was the same time. But yeah, so I just thank you for that. I'm not sure I have any questions at this time. I'm still just in a lot of reflection on how I can continue to with the resources we have, like you were saying, Matthew, with those resources, be the best that we can be with those internal controls.
I think another thing that small staffs are looking at is you do want to have those internal controls, but you also don't want your processes to become cumbersome. You want to be able to keep your processes moving and not have something kind of held in the back until someone else is able to pick up the string. How do you handle that in a small organization?
I was going to say, actually,
Olivia, go ahead.
It did remind me of one thing I was thinking about, and what has helped us is that we do have a process around spending limits and signing up checks. So for example, if within our board of directors, within the budget, if it's a budgeted item, and if it's within about $1,000 of that budget, give or take, I have the right to go ahead, write the check, make the approvals and things. When it starts going above that $1,000, I need to check in with my finance committee. And then, but I can still do that, but I generally do a check-in with that. And then at the $5,000 level, we require a double signature. That's based on our business. We don't do that very often. So at that 5,000, we require the double signature. And anything, gosh, I want to say no, I can't remember. I have to double check, but I want to say it's something like 15 to 20,000. Especially that 15,000, when that really comes to like capital projects and things of that nature, the AC breaks, something like that, we have to go to full finance committee with full board approval at that point. So those are also the internal controls that we've built in to ensure that not I know what I'm doing, and I have guidance as to the decisions I can make with that oversight, appropriate oversight. But Sue, like you said, to not hold things back, and those thresholds are based on our business. So if we were a business 3 times the size, our thresholds might be very different, or that process might look very different.
Yeah, I think those are good controls, and those are ones that I've seen in other organizations too, where you'll have a dollar amount where then yes, you want a board member signing the check, and then another dollar amount where it's such a big amount that you want some sort of approval by like the board of directors or the finance committee or something like that. So I think that's really good.
Yeah, but I don't have to get everything.
Nope.
Right.
Anybody have any last minute thoughts on this particular topic? Anything that we haven't discussed yet?
I don't have anything additional, but this has been really helpful. I stepped into a treasurer role where the previous treasurer was not as engaged, I would say. And so a lot of these things are ringing bells of, okay, I know we've sort of talked about this, but I've been taking notes about things that I want to go back to the executive director about. So really, really appreciate the thoughts from everybody on the call today.
Yeah, I do think that writing down the control processes too, I think that is a really good control. I've seen that on a few different audits I've worked on, and that seems to work really well. And then too, just picking some controls to like kind of test like internally to make sure that they're working correctly. I think that that's really good.
It does seem like once it's documented, then
Mhm.
it's a process you need to follow.
And you have different people assigned to it, and you can kind of see who should be doing what. I think that instead of just kind of going, well, we kind of know what our process is, but and we kind of know who's assigned to it. I think that that's good to have it documented. Like, okay, these people are going to do this. These people are going to do this, all the way start to the end. At least for some of the bigger, more important processes.
Right.
Great. If everybody feels comfortable with the topic being covered pretty well, we could probably end a little early unless anybody wants to tell us something exciting that's happening in your organization. What's going on with the Neighbors Place other than getting ready for a move?
Oh, so we are working on Empty Bowls, but sadly, we're not going to be doing a big in-person event again this
Okay.
year. We're going to do what we did last year. It worked really well. We did a totally online using an app called QGive. And we did something called Empty Bowls to Go, or soup stops, rather soup stops. So we're going to have some restaurants like we did last year that we're going to highlight where people
Okay.
can go and get a soup to go. Yeah, because as we're getting closer and we were planning and with all the unknowns, we don't want to put a lot of time and effort into something that we've got to cancel. So thankfully, we learned a lot of lessons last year. So we're going to take what we did well and improve on that. So yeah, that's we're working on that right now. And we also are working. I'll know Friday. We were getting ready to reopen at the end of September with our new safe and healthy food pantry model. But now with the COVID variant, with the Delta variant, I'm not sure if we're going to do that. We may continue to stay outside for a while yet. But we're still doing it in getting ready inside, training, and we're just in getting rid of stuff. So the goal is before we move that everything is out of this building and we just have the day-to-day things we need and all the other stuff is gone. And Matthew, I don't even want to think about all of the logistics that's going to involve moving from here to there and all the financial stuff involved with all of that, but sale of a building and leasing a new space but we're going to get it done. And so the good thing is when you have things that you do day to day, it shouldn't be a big scary thing.
That's true.
So we're working Empty Bowls. That's our big news, but staying cognizant of what's happening with this Delta variant.
Your mention of the Empty Bowls is just a reminder, and anyone that has an event that should be on our charitable events calendar, make sure that Kelly and Jenna are aware of that. So we have that listed on our calendar for people to look at. Nancy, you've got some fun things going on at the Monk Gardens. I know you have Shakespeare in the Garden coming up. That's exciting.
Right, we've had a really busy summer with all kinds of programming, summer camps, things like that. And yes, Shakespeare is coming up, and we also just launched our fall plant sale. And we are excited to be opening our Sprouts preschool I think it's in September. So we're really excited about that. It will be held in a yurt. So stop out and see the yurt. It's really cool.
And I'm excited to see your new yurt, especially when they've got little sprouts in it.
That's right. And so we did hire a preschool teacher, so we're
Awesome.
set to go.
Awesome. I saw that Jenna just put in the chat the address to send your events to, so make sure you do that. Olivia, what you got going on at the conservatory?
Yeah. So we're kind of quiet starting this week because we're transitioning out of our summer semester into the fall. We had the end of the summer semester was actually such a wonderful home run with our musical theater camps. We did 2 weeks of that. We had guest artist Jay Pierce. I have been, if you're on social media, I have been saturating and hitting people over the head with it. So you know, see it. So yeah, we're gearing up for the fall. I will say, I always say cautiously optimistic because our summer was interesting. We had to cancel our large camps for various reasons. So for example, like our big camps we always do that are so successful, band camp, we've had to cancel it. We've never done that before. So that was a bummer. But then at the same time, we've had our best private lesson enrollment since 2017. I say I'm cautiously optimistic that not only is the community, coming back to what we do, feeling comfortable with coming back. I hope that continues. I hope we are reaching new people. It seems like we are. We're really starting to build a little bit of a new audience with, I call it like the young adult, a lot of the young males who play in bands, who discover that they need to up their musician skills to be in their band. It's really funny. I'm very happy about it. So like I said, cautiously optimistic. I'm just really keeping my fingers crossed that we can keep the momentum going. We are also in a strategic plan light process, which I haven't told anybody. So you are all kind of getting that word a little early. I call it a light because it's not your full-fledged strategic planning process, but we do have a very good, diverse group of people discussing this and working through what our next 1, 3, 5 years are going to look like. And I do think that hopefully out of this, my goal is to really understand where the holes are that we're not meeting for our community. How can we be the leader for our community? And defining what does innovation, what does leadership mean for us within that. So I'm really excited to see what comes out of that. And I think that's the most of it. At least that's what my brain is thinking about all day. Yeah, thank you.
Good, that's good. Amanda, what organization are you newly on the board for?
I'm with the Humane Society of Marathon County.
Yep. What you got going on with all those puppies and kittens?
Well, things were moving pretty well all throughout COVID, and we haven't seen, in some areas, people bringing animals back that they adopted during the pandemic. We're not seeing that same kind of issue. So kind of business as normal all throughout the entire pandemic here. We weren't able to have a lot of our in-person events, as many of you are acutely aware, but we did have a fair number of virtual options, and then just a lot of support from the community. So we're actually in a really positive spot for our fiscal year that just ended about a month ago. But we are having an in-person event at the end of this month at the shelter. Maybe it's Friday the 27th. So that'll be nice because we're actually looking at doing some tours of the facility. So I don't really think that's been done in a long time. And then just also mingling with the board, things like that. So we're hopefully, that's going to be more of an outdoor event. We had some things in the works to do into the fall and winter, and it'll really depend on what's happening with COVID and at that time. But kind of expected to take a hit from COVID, but we came out pretty good on the other side.
That's great to hear. Great to hear. I just want to make 2 notes before we close, and then we're going to ask Tim and Kelly if anything exciting is going on at the Community Foundation. Just want to note 2 dates. October 13 is our next Lunch and Learn with Lindley Daly. So if you haven't registered for that, go ahead and do that. That'd be awesome. And then November 11, we'll be doing another, as we did last year with local foundations, a pitch. We'll find a couple organizations that are willing to pitch a grant idea, and we'll see how that goes. That was a fun event last year for our one of our exchanges. So we'll be doing a pitch. I'm going to say goodbye, but I'm going to look to Tim, Kelly, if there's anything that you want to announce as far as the Community Foundation. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Kelly, do you have announcements?
I don't believe I have any announcements. Yeah. So I don't know, Tim, if you have something that I'm not thinking of.
No, I don't have anything big I was going to share, but it's sure a pleasure to be able to be on a call with all of you, and really a pleasure to be able to work with Wipfli over the years. They've been so supportive and helpful in helping us be accurate and transparent and really to do a good job on the finance side. And they also offer solid advice for us in some other spaces too. So thankful for this time today. We're here for all of you. If you have questions, ideas, or whatever, or ways for us to improve too, even. So we're on this path together to be, buttoned up solidly with all of our financial processes and reporting. And so I'm thankful for Sue for setting this up, and for Whipfly's solid advice. So thank you very much. And Matt, thanks so much for your help. He's the one who gets us through the audit, and we try to listen to his input, and it's always been good. So
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been nice talking, and yeah, I enjoy working with you guys too.
thanks. Good. Well, have a good day, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great